Hello, welcome to ICRC-TV's COVID-19 HR and Business Updates. Andy Pridemore here, founder and principal consultant for the Human Resource USA. I got another great show for you. I absolutely am trying really hard to listen to what you have to say. Of course, I tell you that every week, but I have to, right? Because you need to know that you're controlling the show more than I am. And that's not scary to me at all. It is absolutely not scary to me at all, because quite frankly, I'm having so much fun getting the speakers that you're asking for or the information that you're looking for. COVID is not going away. As with every week, we're going to have some new information for you, as well as some updates on some changes that are taking place. And I have brought in some experts so that we can continue on the idea of bringing you solutions. I mean, after all, that's what this is all about, is solutions. I want to take a moment real quick, though, to say hello to some of our viewers who have been really, really good about feedback every week. And that's Richard out in Texas. That's Lisa here in Cincinnati. My gosh, Ben, Arizona. Guys, thank you so much for kind of guiding me a little bit and letting me know what you're thinking and what you're experiencing. And anyone else, all comments are welcome. So last week, if you were watching, we had Dave Welcher from St. Elizabeth's EAP program come in. And Dave was so good about helping us better understand what an EAP can provide. I mean, let's all admit, we've all got a level of stress. We all are about at our wits' ends with all the different changes, but then all the different challenges that we're having to deal with personally, as well as professionally. And those viewers that are with us that are business owners, guys, you can't run away from this stuff. It's not going to go away. So now that Dave's made it very, very clear, look, there's stress in your workplace, whether you're accepting it or not. I took it one step further for you this week and invited in some experts on. So EAPs are really, really good for that emotional and that psychological side. Really good with the whole therapy aspect, but my gosh, what about the physical aspect? And if you remember early in our season, we had an ergonomic specialist here from Workers' Comp to talk about all the different things that individuals should be taking into consideration when they work remote, right? The chairs, the sitting patterns, how we posture our backs, and let's not ignore the fact that most of you are probably still sitting on your couch or at your coffee table or at your dining room table. So where are we now that we're 6 months into this? You know, where are we in terms of taking care of us as individuals in this new way of work? Well, today I've got two speakers that I have just thoroughly enjoyed knowing for years and years for multiple reasons. But now they've decided to, I begged them. I'll just be very truthful. I went to them and said, look, this is what they're asking for. This is what they're looking for. What can you do to help me? First, we've got Michelle Dunn. Michelle and I go way back. And I have to say, I've even been to some of her triathlons. So Coach Dunn, as she is known here in the Cincinnati market, is joined us here. Her company is called Edge Training. And she works with all age groups in terms of helping them understand just how important it is, no matter what you do for a living or who you are as an individual, just how important it is to stay healthy. And from a physical perspective as well as a nutritional perspective. And then all the way out in Phoenix, Arizona, I'm dragging in an old college buddy, David Barrett. David is the founder and chief trainer, I will call him, for Why Wait, Be Fit. I even have it on a cheat sheet, David, I'm sorry. Why Wait, Be Fit. David has worked with some major corporations throughout the country and understands very, very much that importance of keeping your employees healthy. And both of them have decades of experience. This is definitely down their wheelhouse. So we're going to give them the first half of the show, and then the second half of the show, if you don't recognize this guy, I don't know where you've been, because he's all over the TV. He speaks at all sorts of engagements here in the Cincinnati, Kentucky market. Bill Hesh, founder and sole owner for, gosh, how many businesses, Bill?
My law firm and my CPA firm, yes.
Okay.
I'm also a registered investment advisor too, yes.
Yeah, this guy's a CPA. He's an attorney. He's a financial planner. Bill, needless to say, is knee deep in the PPP loan and all the aspects that are going on there. So he's going to be kind of walking us through some of the issues that may be changing around the whole gambit of the forgiveness of the loans. But I also want to prod him a little bit about that memorandum that Trump just signed in regards to the payroll taxes and how that's going to affect all of you who own a business or who are doing the books for the business. So Bill's going to take the heavy end of our show, and the fun end is going to be here with Michelle and David. Michelle, David, welcome. Thank you again for agreeing to do this. You know, did I say it right when I said that an EAP can help with the emotional and the psychological aspect, and you guys work more towards the physical side?
I would say yes. David, you can jump in as well. I think it's also really important to recognize how they interplay with one another. So the emotional and the psychological is critical with the EAP programs, but if we ignore the physical piece, we literally just remove opportunities to support the emotional and the psychological as well. So David, you may have some other points on that, but that's part of where the physical movement and if we don't pay attention to that, whether it's nutrition and moving and exercise and staying healthy, there's going to be deficits in other areas.
I agree 100%, Michelle. You know, the physical part of it, people take for granted, especially now everybody's been quarantined and stuck up in their houses and everything else, and they're looking for that outlet. And the mental part of it is very difficult. I know out here and dealing with even a lot of my friends and couple of my clients, you know, it's like they're just itching for the gyms to be open, and they still haven't reopened those, even though they've been sued. The governor's been sued. He has no information on why the gyms are being treated differently than big box stores and everything else. But people are going crazy. And so the mental aspect of it, but as you alluded to with the physical aspect, people don't realize how much the physical aspect actually contributes to increasing endorphins and other hormones in their body that make them feel better and help relieve that mental stress. It just gives them another platform to do it. And, you know, I think that there's obviously a lot of opportunity to work with businesses with their wellness plans, third-party providers, and so forth to help them get people like you and I involved and help people that are working remotely and never have worked remotely before. I had a sales job up until April 15th and lost that due to COVID, but I welcome the opportunity to work at home, and I've been doing it for 6-7 years. Some of my colleagues that had to work from home when the whole COVID-19 shutdown started, they were going crazy because they missed that interaction. You know, a lot of them were single like myself, and that was their daily interaction was with their coworkers. And so mentally that put a strain on them. And then if you look at a lot of people's home environments that have maybe never worked at home, maybe they don't even have an office set up. You know, maybe they don't have a desk and a chair and everything at the proper heights, and they're sitting on the couch with their laptop in their lap and trying to do their work. So that's going to lead to stress, tension in the shoulders, neck, low back, wherever it may go to, and we can help those people.
Well, help me understand the difference between chasing your kids around the house and the type of proper physical exercise and movement we should be doing if we're a remote worker.
Yeah, I think we also got to keep in mind that none of us are suggesting anybody needs to be a elite Ironman when it comes to lifestyle changes. No one's asking anyone to jump significantly, but it is so critical to think about, as David, as you alluded to, some people don't have an office set up, and nor are companies necessarily funding people completely redesigning their homes. And then there is still life happening around us, right? There's the laundry, the cleaning, the everything that goes on with families. And it went from life moving at a rapid pace and a lot of stress to stress and distress and life happening with a global pandemic on top of all of that, and then economic situations. And it just began to spiral. And so, as David mentioned, organizations like himself, people that I work with, we come in and we help make sure that we clear up some of that chaos, find some ways that will work so that we can make small changes that will be impactful. You don't have to buy an expensive standing desk, for example. If you have an ironing board, tell yourself that this meeting and this meeting, I'm going to be at my standing desk for those, and stand at your ironing board. Wake up in the morning and be mindful of what you immediately jump onto with your phone or device. I think it's a lot to tell people not to touch their device in the morning. I don't know about you guys, but it's one of the first things I go to. As Pandy and I were talking about, these phones are computers, and a lot of us don't have cable. But I have subscriptions to certain types of streaming that I will watch in the morning. I do not watch repeats of the nightly news from the night before, for example, because as we just mentioned, with mood and the brain and the emotional and psychological, if we kick off the day on the wrong track, we come from a deficit, and it's near impossible to shift that throughout the day with all the different things that come at us. So yeah, it does not have to be a major 180 shift. Standing table, using an ironing board, determining what we eat during the day can have a great impact. Deciding what meetings are going to be walking meetings. They can be treated as what we call in a lot of athletic performances an interval. When you're on a meeting, the mute button is a beautiful thing, right? Whether it's on Zoom, you can turn off the video. Whether it's on the phone, you can mute it. When you're walking and not talking and listening, you pick up your pace and you hit mute so you can listen. Then when you speak, you just taper it back a little bit so you don't sound out of breath. But it makes that walk a little bit more effective for your day and being physical. David, what thoughts do you have?
Yeah, that was very well said, Michelle. And people don't understand what simple things that they can do, how easy it is. You know, like you alluded to, you don't have to go out and buy fancy equipment or anything else, you know, just as you alluded to, you know, taking a walk. You know, you've probably dealt with it. I've dealt with it over the years. You get a client that's overweight and just wants to lose some weight. And one of the first questions I ask them, I had one, it was a business that I was working with, and the owner, it's a law firm, and they were trying to keep their partners healthy. And this woman was severely overweight. They were on the third floor of a building. And so I asked her, when you come and leave the building, do you take the elevator or do you go up the stairs? She was like, oh, I take the elevator. And so I suggested she take the stairs, just even down one flight or up one flight to start. And she says, well, you know, my briefcase is 30, 40 pounds. I'm like, okay, just try one floor, you know, but for a lot of people, that's hard. But there's simple changes like that you can make to your lifestyle. And then because of people being at home, there's other things that they need to think about too. Like you alluded to, the standing desk. Yeah, stand for an hour or two. And then if you have a desk or the kitchen table, and go sit, but set a timer for an hour. And every hour when that timer goes off, get up, walk to your patio, do something with your kids, you know, because that again will reset the body somewhat so that you're not going to get all those overstressed issues in your neck, shoulders, low back, and places that typically that occurs. I had a hairdresser that I worked with years ago in Ohio, and she got terrible stress migraines. And typical hairdresser, she's got her arms up working on people's hair all day, didn't take breaks. And by the end of the day, that tension went up her shoulders into her head and exposed itself as a migraine. So I said, here's what you need to do. And I said, I don't care how you do it. You can go, they had a very small break room and a restroom. I said, go in the restroom, go in the break room, but I want you to start doing these shoulder stretches and exercises between every client. I said, take the 2 minutes and do it. And of course, she pushed back a little bit. And well, what if we're slammed? I'm like, we're talking about your health, not the customer's hair, you know? So she started doing it, and then within 2 weeks, her migraines had gone from daily to maybe one a week. But just simple things like that that people aren't aware of that they can be doing, you know, to alleviate the physical stress from the emotional stress possibly that's building up inside them while they're working from home or dealing with families, you know, like you alluded to earlier, Pandy, you know, chasing the kids around the house. Well, sometimes that's necessary. Not necessarily maybe because you're playing with them, but maybe you need to corral them because they're interrupting what you're trying to do at work, and they're not, you know, and if they're young, they don't totally get it that mommy or daddy is working and needs to be quiet certain times and stuff. But, you know, so different things like that. There's a lot of ways to help people with that. And now with, you know, Zoom and other online tools to connect with people one-on-one, it's easy to do different types of assessments and see where people are at. So I think it's going to be huge going forward. Because
sorry, if I, Pandy, do you mind if I pivot?
No,
David has mentioned the back and neck and head multiple times, and we've mentioned kids, and I work with clients a lot about actually behaving like toddlers. If you remember, no one taught us when we were teeny tiny how an adorable baby or even a 1 or 2 year old will automatically give that cute baby stretch when they wake up in the morning. Their whole body lengthens out, yet we don't do that as adults. And in the morning, again, when we pick up that phone or when we jump out of bed, very open breaths, bringing out the chest and the diaphragm, moving the shoulders back, because where we have pain presenting, it's actually then often, very often, a lot of my clients deal with, it hurts here, Michelle, but it's really an issue with something else. And I'm sure David's seen that as well. If we fix something here, then for example, migraines go away. But we tend not to do that. And even if it is only 2 minutes or 5 minutes of stretching while you listen to that morning news or your Audible book first thing in the morning, can be a magnificent change in the rest of the day. You start the day relaxed and stressed versus already carrying the weight of the world, which, let's admit it, it's been difficult this year. We've all woken up in the middle of the night thinking about work, school, kids, vulnerable family members, et cetera, our own health. And so we wake up very stressed out, and we have to take that 2 minutes or 5 to really start the day off on the right foot.
Well, and that's a symptom that doesn't come with the EEO's guidelines of COVID. I mean, that's a symptom all to itself, and yet it's all COVID related. I mean, that's what's so crazy is we're suffering from the virus without having the virus because we're stressing out, and therefore I had sciatica for a while. We're getting these shoulder pains, all this other stuff, and it affects the productivity of the employee. It affects the productivity of the business owner. I mean, let's be truthful. If you don't feel good waking up in the morning, why in heaven do you want to be talking to a client or another employee? And you're just different, and it's not a good different in many cases. So this is extremely important. But let's go a little further, because again, David, you made a good point. We've got all this technology now, and we've got all this available, but there's a huge advantage about having a eye-to-eye interaction with someone, and that's why so many products are coming out, like the mirror and the bicycles with all the internet connections. But that's not a live person. And I've got someone who mentioned the other day that I don't need a personal trainer. I'm just going to go to the internet and I'll just bring up some exercise routines. Help me explain to our viewers why having a real person is really important right now for your employees. I mean, we got to have that interaction.
Well, first of all, like Michelle alluded to a couple minutes ago, is we're all different. We're all built differently, even though we all have the same number of arms, legs, everything else. We're all built differently. And where we're at in life today is a compounding of everything that we've been through in our lives. Some of us, like myself, might have been athletes. Others might have never exercised, didn't like it, but have pains in their knees or hips due to weight issues, things like that. I had a coworker in my sales job, and he was at least 200 pounds overweight. And his one knee, he needed a knee replacement. And the doctor told him, you got to lose at least 100 pounds or I'm not doing the surgery. And he was all upset and saying it hurts now. And it's like, and the doctor tried to tell him, it's like, well, if you don't fix your weight now, that whatever prosthesis we put in there is going to break down within 5 years. And people don't understand that. And, you know, everything starts at the ground as human beings, right? We walk, everything starts at the ground. So as Michelle alluded to earlier, you can have an issue. I've seen baseball pitchers have an issue with their shoulder. And actually the issue is with their ankle flexibility. They don't have enough ankle flexibility. So they're putting undue stress on their arm when they're trying to throw a pitch. So a lot of people will treat the shoulder. But if you don't fix the ankle flexibility issue, it's going to keep coming back. There's a lot of things like that that the average person doesn't understand, that, you know, wherever that issue is exposing itself may not be the point of what's causing it. And that, you know, that's a big difference between Western medicine and medicine in other countries and how they treat symptoms. You know, here we treat the symptom, we give you a pill, we give you physical therapy for that symptom, but we don't ever look at the root cause of what's causing that issue. And there are too many people in my profession that still don't get that. And that's sad to me, but it's like, you can't just keep treating the symptoms. And, you know, and a lot of them do it because they want a lifetime client. And I've never bought into that. You know, I'd rather work with my clients 2 or 3 months and then have them do it on their own if they're so inclined or whatever, but just give them enough information to educate themselves and do it on their own if they want to. You know, we all have to make choices on where we spend our money. And there are certain people that are very self-motivated. And once you put them on the right track, they're going to do it. There are other people that I've had clients tell me, I've got $10,000 worth of exercise equipment in my basement, but if you're not coming over, I'm sitting on the couch as soon as I get home from work. So you're dealing with different mentalities and different people. And when you have this connection, like we're able to look at each other and talk to each other today, it can make a huge difference versus somebody going online, pulling some exercise videos. And they could do those exercise videos and they may be making their situation worse.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You're right. And there's a philosophical barrier we've created with preventative medicine. We have a whole new messaging and that we do prevention and it's a physical, when, as you mentioned, in the other countries around the world have a very different philosophy, and it shifts back to wellness. And we have to make that change and that shift ourselves. And no offense, company XYZ, but you're not helping. We've been mindful of the trauma to children this year, but we have just continued to dump on employees. And with this situation, like you mentioned, Pandy, COVID-19 is not going anywhere very soon. And health and wellness is here to stay. We already had issues with sweetener being put in everything, and you're on fast track to diabetes and other issues. And it prevents good physical exercise and movement capacity as well. So we, instead of building in the right direction, we have not only shifted and in a roundabout way rejected our employees through this whole situation, but then not equipped people with the strategies and tools to make little changes and to really own it for themselves. People are going to realize, wait a minute, I am more productive, maybe. I don't know that the metrics are really supporting that yet. We're seeing more time from employees, but productivity is questionable. And that's going to come back and get us in our health, with retention, with so many issues that employees are going to face with their employee pool. So.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in talking to both of you, you each have programs that you can offer employers that will complement the schedules of their employees versus compete. I mean, Michelle, you're a business director for Spot On Productions. You have a full-time job, and yet you're still able to coach and work with your clients and the teams that you work with on a weekly basis. This can be fit in. This is not something that we're asking to completely change the routine of your employees. The other thing too, I want to remind our viewers who are business owners, well, even viewers, look, remember, most of your insurance companies have wellness programs that literally ask you for certain things. How many steps have you taken? What have you done with your scores on your last doctor's appointment? If there are incentives. I know people who are getting $50 gift cards and $100 gift cards and all this stuff because your health is improving. Well, having a personal trainer or working with someone to help you through this remote time and this adjustment time is just going to enhance that and pay off in the long run. So there is a return on the investment. I just think that it's something that we need to look at again as a solution to that other symptom, as I call it, of stress, because that stress is not going away. It's just not. David, you've got a website and an email address that they can reach you at?
I do. The website I have up now, and I'm right in the middle of reworking that to put it under the Y-Weight personal training and sports conditioning business with a corporate page. But right now, my website is www.camp, spelled K-A-M-P, kettlebell.com, and kettlebell is Kettlebell.
Okay.
So www.campkettlebell.com. My personal email address is YW8BFIT@msn.com. So YWeightBeFit. I actually had those license plates, funny story, when I moved to Arizona on my car, my personalized plates. And my first run with a state highway patrolman, because I have a lead foot, he pulled me over, asked me where I was going, and I was on a rural road heading up 4 hours northeast. And so gave him the license registration, and he's like, "What does your license plate mean?" And I'm like, okay, I didn't think it was that difficult to figure out the acronym, but I'm thinking to myself, if this is Arizona's Highway Patrol, I don't know.
Excellent. And Michelle, how do they get a hold of you?
Sure. So as you mentioned, I do work full time, but I also coach and have 3 kids. So another reason I reference kids a lot. And Pandy mentioned that you have programs a lot of times through your employers, or just call your health insurance directly to find out more about the benefits. Those wearables that you see all those ads for, sometimes you can get a reimbursement for a wearable, or like toddlers, no one tells them when to move. They just start moving, and you can do the same. When you see that kid run through the house, do it as well. So my website is coachdone.net, and my email is michelle@coachdone.net.
Yeah, one last thing before you guys both go. Michelle, you said something in our pre-meeting, and you didn't mention it, so I want you to tell our viewers. How should we be eating?
Oh my goodness, yes, nutrition. I love to talk about nutrition because a couple of tips that I love to give people is that it is really hard to completely get rid of any type of treat. And I'm an international family, so we call it a pudding. You get 7 treats or puddings a week, but that's only 7. And when you have a treat, you're not to have an entire jar of Nutella, right? It's just a little treat. I don't encourage some of the other formats where you just have a day of binging. I think it's hard for people to go through those swings and lows. Other tips, have you guys heard of coconut water? I cannot drink one of these straight, no matter how cold it is. But I do use it inside a smoothie as my fluid in the smoothie, as opposed to almond milk, or if you still drink dairy milk, etc. So it's just figuring out ways to substitute and replace, even though you may think it might make you get sick, it won't, but you can tolerate it, right? And hydration, we didn't talk a lot about hydration. It's so critical, but you will not get what you need from water. And I kid you not, working at home all day, you will get dehydrated. We start every morning in that place of deficit, I hate to say. So we jump through those hoops by doing things like coconut water and different types of nutrition, which we can play into foods as well. If you just drink water all day, you're gonna be racing to the bathroom. So, and sleep, my goodness, right, David? Sleep is so critical. And the big key on sleep is consistent sleep. Same time at night going to bed, same time in the morning. So, and you won't be surprised when you don't need an alarm anymore. Thanks,
Your basis is around toddlers. We put my grandson, he was a toddler, we put him down at the same time every night.
Right.
And you made a comment about snacking. We should snack like toddlers.
Yep, snack like a toddler. I even lately, the past couple months, I've packed my own lunch. Even though I might be at home working remote, I will pack a lunch so I don't think about it. I go straight out to get it from the garage fridge because I'm leaving. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to go to lunch, grab it from the garage fridge, and that's my lunch. If I go over to that pantry, y'all know we can get sucked in and it's all over then, right? But we don't typically offer toddlers lots of really unhealthy things. And so part of what's challenging through this whole COVID situation is it's like a bowl of spaghetti right now. Everything's weaved into each other. It's not a waffle where we can just compartmentalize everything that's going on in our lives. We put it all into the mix, and anything you can do to help take that out of it. It's kind of like the Steve Jobs philosophy, right? Jeans and a black t-shirt. Make it as simple as possible for you so you don't get pulled into terrible habits that can impact your health long term.
Well, I just want to piggyback on what you talked about on sleep, Michelle. One of the things that a lot of people don't realize is, you know, with the new smart TVs and our iPad screens and whatever the Google tablets are, or whatever, you know, that blue light is not good for us. And I know I struggled with that because when I couldn't sleep at night, or didn't feel like I was ready to go to bed, I'd be getting on my phone, checking Facebook, checking my website, things like that. And then I go to bed and now I'm wide awake. And I started doing some research, and the blue light that's emanating from your phones, your iPads, your computer screens, your TVs is not good for you. So you need to get away from that for at least an hour before you go to bed. And I've been trying to educate my coworkers, anybody I come in contact with on that, because it is like our phone is our lifeline. Yeah. I lost my phone. I don't know what happened to it. I called, I had the insurance, they were shipping a new one, but I didn't have it for 4 days, and I was going absolutely nuts because I use it to take my pictures. I use it for my clock. I don't like wearing jewelry on my body. So that was my watch and everything else. And, you know, I had to realize, God, you're so dependent on that. Why? You know, get a life.
It was my 20-year-old who suggested I get the blue light glasses. So you can get those to protect your eyes, and it helps with that, David. And Pandy, I'm more than happy to love to talk to anybody who's interested in some assessments. They can schedule a time with me on the website, and we can go through what either they need individually, or if someone wants to talk about their teams and what their teams might need.
And if you didn't get the email addresses, remember you can always contact the station. They'll be more than happy to forward the information to either David or Michelle, or you can get a hold of me directly. Guys, thank you so very, very much. I wish I could say that business owners could actually put a policy together and say, all right, everybody has to go to bed at this hour and everybody has to do at least 30 minutes of exercise every day. It's essential work duty for your job, but it doesn't work that way. We can, though, put a policy in place telling them not to do any work beyond a certain time. Yes. And not to check their work emails and not to be sending out work emails. We can do that, but I'm watching to see if there's anything we can do in there in terms of the exercising stuff. Guys, thank you so very, very much. Great information, absolutely great. And again, any of you, they will both be very, very receptive to any information or questions or any comments you want to make about their spot. Guys, thank you.
Thanks, Pandy. Appreciate it. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you. Thanks, David.
I'm going to move over to Bill Hesh now, the CPA, the attorney, and the financial planner. What else could anyone ask for when they walk into your office? Oh, I know. They could ask for HR.
Oh, yeah. Or maybe some of those good desserts that Michelle was talking about, one of your 7 desserts for the week. So, anyway, it's great that you invited me to be on today, talk about the payroll protection program and the loan forgiveness that businesses that got the program are going to be involved in loan forgiveness. I don't know where we should start. Maybe we should just kind of summarize for people that may not be aware of the nuances with the payroll protection program and what costs qualify for the payroll protection program.
Great. Just take it over.
Yeah. So I think the whole purpose of this was to, when COVID hit and they were shutting down businesses, was to keep people on the payroll. And so basically that's the number one thing that they look at. And when they first started out, that the amount of the loan was defined to be your payroll costs for 2019, your average payroll monthly costs times 2.5. Also, they said if you had rent or if you owned a building, your mortgage interest and your utilities. That would also be a cost that would qualify under this program, that you could pay those monies for. You would have basically, you looked at your average monthly expense from 2019 and multiply that by 2.5, and that was the loan you could qualify for that related to those expenses. Also, for payroll, they included health insurance, your retirement plan contributions, your state unemployment taxes that you would pay. So there's some other little expenses that qualified under that program when you applied for the loan. And the third thing that some people overlook are the utilities. So it could be your telephone, it could be your internet access, your gas, your water, your sanitation. So those are all the expenses that were intended to help business owners get through the initial shutdown for basically 8 weeks is how it started. And when June rolled around, they realized this isn't going anywhere, and people were not able to maybe use all that money because you got 2.5 times your monthly expense, but they only gave you 8 weeks. So they expanded that out to basically 24 weeks because a lot of businesses were shut down and didn't have any payroll. So in June, they expanded the program, and they also made it a little bit more liberal that originally you had to have 75% of your loan be payroll, and they cut it back to 60%. So that kind of helped business owners trying to identify costs that would qualify. And so what a business owner needs to do then, once they got the loan, was keep track of their actual expenses that they had for their payroll, their rent, or their mortgage payments, your utilities, as well as maybe your internet access charges, your telephone. It's also interesting to know that if you're a business owner, you could potentially use some of your home office expenses to qualify for being reimbursed under this program. And so one thing that is really important that people need to recognize is that they said that this was a grant and this was going to be tax-free income to the business. Well, there's the yin and the yang, and the IRS came out at the end of April and said, well, yeah, by the way, that is great. It is tax-free money, that if that loan is forgiven, you got to apply for that, and the loan is forgiven, then in that situation, you don't have to pick up income. But then the IRS came out and ruled and said, by the way, do you know there's some special tax rules that say if you get tax-free income, then the expenses that are used to pay that you use that money to pay expenses for are not tax deductible. What does that mean? Well, it means basically your loan's taxable, even though it wasn't supposed to be, but that's how the IRS has ruled. I can tell you that they're looking on some recent developments that they're trying to get an extension of the payroll protection program and some other, the economic stimulus package that the Congress is kind of still fighting about. And President Trump had some executive orders. But the bottom line is that it hasn't gone away, and that you do, in fact, need to qualify for loan forgiveness, but it is going to be taxable. That's the bottom line. And the IRS ruling has not been overturned and any of the discussions we've had have not indicated that they're going to change that position. So you need to plan, if you're a business owner, realize that you're going to be paying for all these expenses, but you're not going to get a tax deduction for them. And so to me, the simplest way of looking at it is that the loan, when it's forgiven, is basically taxable income, and you deduct all your expenses. So that's something that people should be aware of regarding their tax planning. The other thing that I would mention, and I found this out because I did get a payroll protection loan myself, and I was looking at the loan forgiveness rules. And if you're a business owner, a sole proprietorship or a partnership, you do qualify for what's called deemed payroll. Now you say, what is deemed payroll? Well, if you're a corporation or an S corporation and you're an owner, you get a salary, you get wages, you get a W-2. So you did qualify as a business owner, as a C corporation or as an S corporation, that you got 2.5 months of payroll up to a maximum of $100,000, by the way. So that qualified you then for getting money from the loan to pay you for your payroll, in addition to your employees. Now, let's talk about the fact in June, originally they started out that you had expenses for 8 weeks, and now they've extended it to 24 weeks. But as a business owner, basically under the 8-week scenario, if you divide 8 weeks into $100,000 on a weekly basis, it means that you can basically be paying yourself around $15,833. And that's part of the deemed payroll. And if you use the alternative 24-week program to count expenses, because maybe you needed more time to use up your loan for qualified expenses, then you can go beyond the 8 weeks to up to 24 weeks. And in that situation, then the business owner is limited to 2.5 times basically that weekly expense that we talked about, that was basically $100,000 divided by 52. And so you basically got 2.5 months instead of 8 weeks. What that means is that if the owner uses the 24-week program, then they can pay themselves $20,833. Now, when I was doing my reading last week, I found out, actually it was the end of July, that you have to write a check to yourself as a sole proprietor or as a partner and designate that check as deemed payroll. So I did that to myself out of the proceeds from my payroll protection program. Now, what was really interesting about that is I talked about the fact that you don't get a tax deduction for the expenses that the loan is used to pay. What's interesting is, as an owner of a business, the money you pay yourself as a partner in a partnership or as a sole proprietor owner, that check for whether it's up to the maximum is $15,833 if you're 8 weeks on your loan forgiveness expenses, or if you go 24 weeks, $20,833. That's tax-free income because you don't take a tax deduction for your deemed payroll. So that's a little bit of a nuance that sole proprietors and partnerships got a little bit of a tax benefit that was really kind of unexpected, but that's how it plays out, quite frankly. So the rules are kind of complex, and let me share something with you also. Congress has recognized that you're going to basically have to apply to give documentation to your bank, which will provide documentation to the SBA that your expenses met all this criteria. And I think Congress got smart in saying, well, we got all these loans. We got these, all these loans out there. It's going to cost millions of dollars for the bank and the SBA to audit all these loans. So Congress has, and Treasury Secretary Mnuchin was saying that if any loan is $150,000 or less, what they're planning on doing is they're saying you're not going to have to submit the documentation to the bank. You'll be submitting the loan forgiveness application form, but you're going to have to keep the documentation. So you got to beware. It doesn't mean you're off the hook. In fact, you got to keep it for 6 years. So be careful. You keep all this documentation, because if you are audited in the future, you need to come up with the documentation to substantiate it. But what you're going to be submitting to the bank is that you do have the records, and the records that you're submitting to the bank and to the SBA are accurate. They are exactly the same information that applies to your tax return. So beware that you may have heard about, that if you are under $150,000, your loan is going to be forgiven. Yes, in a way, it is going to be forgiven. They're not going to audit your records, but you need to keep them in case they want to audit you in the future. That's just something you should be aware of, quite frankly. So, Pandy, that's kind of a little bit of an overview of the basic rules. And I think that there are some special rules that apply that I do want to comment on, because some business owners started their business in January. And you say, well, what do I do? And in fact, the last date to apply for the payroll protection loan expired on August 9th. So it's gone. I don't know if they're going to extend it down the road. We don't know. But if you did open up your business in January, in fact, you are eligible for the payroll protection loan. People may not have known that. And right now it's kind of too late if you didn't apply. But maybe if they open up the window again, you may be able to apply for the payroll protection loan because they didn't use up all the money that they allocated. That's the funny thing about it. There's $160 billion of money that was allocated to this program that was not used. But what I'm trying to share with you, though, is that if that is your situation, what you are required to do is you look at your first 2 months of January and February. You had to be in business as of February 15th of 2020. But you would look at your actual expenses for the first 2 months of the year, January and February, and you would compute your average monthly expense from that. If you're only in business for 1 month, then I would take 1 month of expenses, and then you can apply for a loan equal to 2.5 times of that monthly expense. So that's the first step if you want to qualify for a loan, that you provide documentation that said that you had these expenses and that you make that computation, and then you apply for the loan and they give you the loan. Then once you get the loan, the 8-week and the 24-week period that we're talking about starts on the date you receive the loan. And you go out 8 weeks. So somebody that just got a loan this past week, they might have applied August 9th or August 8th. They may not get the money for another week. You're going to go 24 weeks from maybe August 17th, if that's the date you get your money. And you go forward 24 weeks, and you keep track of your expenses to qualify, your eligible payroll, your rent, your mortgage payment if you own the building or if you lease the building, and some of your other utility expenses. And so you have to keep track of those expenses going forward during the subsequent 8 or 24-week period. And so then you use that documentation to then apply to the bank and the SBA. They have an application you fill out for basically getting the loan forgiven at the end of the 8 or up at the end of the 24-week period. So you don't have to wait till the end of the 24-week period, but right now the banks are recommending that we're going to see if they're going to forgive the loan, because then you don't have to submit all the documentation to the bank. So what the SBA has come up with is that there is a simple, I'll show this a little form here, 1-page form. It's called the Form 3508EZ form. That's the form you use if you're going to be applying for loan forgiveness and your loan is under $150,000. They take off the EZ and it's the Form 3508 if your loan is $150,000 or more. Okay. And so that 1-page form that you have, that you're basically certifying that you're eligible for this loan and you meet all these criteria. And there was one condition that I want to mention that is very important, that because of COVID, you were supposed to keep the same people on the payroll. And so you might have been in a situation that they shut you down and you didn't keep the people on the payroll because there's no work to do. And that's the purpose of this 24-week program, because you have 24 weeks to maybe bring people on board after the shutdown. Like in Ohio and Kentucky, the shutdown pretty much ended for a lot of businesses in May, but even some businesses were limited that they could only operate 25% capacity for bars and restaurants, or 50% capacity. So there are some exceptions that apply that says that, let me put it this way, if you reduced your number of employees by 25%, then they would apply a reduction in the amount of the loan that's forgiven. So you had to keep at least 75% of your full-time employees or equivalent full-time employees on the payroll during this 8-week or 24-week period. And if you didn't do that, then potentially you would not qualify for full loan forgiveness. But there are 2 exceptions that apply. So it gets really complicated, okay? And this is just for a small business that has a $150,000 loan. And one of the exceptions is that, well, you tried to hire people back, but they wouldn't come back. And we had some problem with some people, several businesses that I know, that the people were making more money getting the unemployment through the end of July, and they wouldn't come back. So if you have documentation for that, you can, in fact, then that's an exception to the rule that would allow you, that if you can prove that you tried to have these people come back and they refused to come back, that's an exception that could apply to you so that all of your loan could get forgiven because it was for circumstances beyond your control that the employees wouldn't come back. Or you couldn't find qualified workers. So we don't know how they're going to define that, but you can say, gee, I looked all over and I couldn't find anybody to replace them. So they wouldn't come back and you couldn't find a qualified worker. If you can document that, then all of your loan could be forgiven, even though you didn't hire and replace 75% of your employees, or from that standpoint, or it got reduced from 75% to 60%. So these rules are a little bit complicated. And the second exception is that maybe you didn't hire the people because your business got cut. You got shut down. Some businesses were closed. Restaurants and bars are a good example. So in that situation, the fact that you didn't bring the people back and you didn't hire 75% of the same full-time equivalent person, but you got 24 weeks to pay them, then that becomes an exception too, that you can document that basically your sales were limited. And you can look at what your sales were last year compared to this year. And because of COVID, all the restaurants and bars, even when they opened up the end of May in Ohio and Kentucky, they still had a problem. They could only operate at 25 or 50% capacity. Why are they going to bring everybody back? That doesn't make sense. You're just throwing money away. So that's another exception for that. So there are a lot of different types of rules that you need to be aware of. If your loan is over $150,000, that can be very complicated. There's a company that had they sent out an email blast. It's called Client Wise. There it is right there. It's like 27 pages, but it goes through the loan forgiveness application, the easy form and the long form, page by page by page. It's kind of interesting. In the long form, you're not going to believe this. In the long form, there are 3 schedules that you have to fill out for the SBA. But they prepared 5 other schedules to be used to fill out the 3 schedules that you have to use for the long form. It gets so complicated. So I'm just trying to tell you, it is a challenge. And you don't take it lightly. If you have a loan over $150,000, you need good, competent CPA counsel or legal counsel to interpret the rules, because there's not a lot of guidance on how you interpret all these nuances that your business may have relative to the expenses and whether you qualify for some of these exceptions that I'm talking about. So you got to be aware of that. The other thing yes, Pandy.
I go above and beyond that, and we have been saying since day one on this show that our viewers absolutely need to tuck and hide their egos now and surround themselves with people who know more than they do in regards to, they need to have their CPA, they need to have their attorney, they need to have, a strong financial planner in their back pocket.
Right, exactly.
These are not situations that any of our viewers should try to go through by themselves. And as you mentioned numerous times, several things keep changing in the process. So it's not even once they pass this, it stays etched in stone. They're still modifying, they're still tweaking, they're still refining. And we just have to know that this is going to happen. What's one of my favorite phrases? Change is one of the only, or if not the only, constant in the universe. And this whole pandemic has been a huge example of that. I'm going to shift you a little bit here. I know you could go on for another hour, and that's why I love the enthusiasm. It's absolutely phenomenal. But I do want to add one quick thing. Yes. There are 3 tax credits out there: the qualified family leave credit, the qualified paid leave sick credit, and the employee retention credit. You got to be careful, because if you get the PPP loan, you may not qualify for those credits. So you got to make sure that there's all kinds of other stimulus ideas out there. You got to make sure that you don't double dip, because then you're in trouble. Exactly. Oh gosh. And the pitfalls are everywhere. President Trump just wrote a memorandum here in the last few days offering payroll tax credits, deductions. What is that, Bill? What they're talking about is every employer has Social Security taxes that they pay, which is 6.15%. And Medicare taxes are 1.35%. So basically 7.65% of every employer, if you have your wages, if your wages are 100,000, basically around 7.65% are the payroll taxes that the employer pays on the employees. And they're talking about, the president is talking about suspending that between now and the end of the year, so that would give small businesses more cash to compensate for basically the loss of business they have because of the COVID shutdown. So it's a way to put money directly into the pocket
and then also to employees, and employees are paying the same amount. So it's a way and what he's trying to do is he wants people to come back to work and not go on unemployment.
Yeah.
So if you come back to work, then you're going to save 7.65% in Social Security payroll taxes that you're not going to have to pay out of your paycheck. So it gives you more spendable dollars to, again, help you through this COVID situation.
Is that official? Is that really going to happen?
Well, they're challenging whether it's constitutional or not. The Democrats are. So we don't know what's going to really happen, quite frankly. But from a political standpoint, I heard on the news recently that an analogy would be that when Obama had the Obamacare, he used some government money to pay insurance companies, and that wasn't in the legislation. So they gave that as an analogy that it isn't like this is unprecedented, but that it is a question as to whether the president has the authority under his executive powers to do so. You got to understand it's going to be very unpopular in an election year when the president's trying to give money to small businesses and employees, and they're trying to challenge whether it's constitutional or not to take it away. Yeah. So that becomes the catch-22 from a political standpoint. But that's what he's trying to do. That's all I can say at this point in time.
Well, and I'm glad you kind of explained the nuances around that, because a federal judge here in New York recently proposed some major changes to the Department of Labor's language and guidelines under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. Guys, please understand that very well likely will be appealed by the Department of Labor. They're going after four major parts of that. Let me see if I can go it through. They're questioning the requirement that in order for an employee to qualify for paid leave, the employer must have work available for the employee. The judge is also questioning the definition of healthcare provider that qualifies for the exemption. He's questioning the need to obtain employer consent in order for an employee to take intermittent leave, paid leave, for certain qualifying benefits, and the need for employees to provide documentation before taking FFCRA qualifying leave. We've talked about those details within the current language. Now this judge is challenging it. Do not change anything that you're doing right now. I know a number of the law firms here in the Cincinnati market have already put out some announcements saying this could be happening, but that's all it is the operative term is could. It may. It is not. None of that has changed. I also want to go back over another issue. I'm seeing more of the email advertisements coming through asking, or the cue is for employers that there's a mandatory poster change. Guys, I want to remind this is the mandatory poster change that is the most recent. This is the employee rights for the FFCRA program. Always remember, before you go and spend a bunch of money on all new labor law posters, remember that if it's coming from the federal government, if it is, well, I'll tell you what, I can tell you almost every state too. If they're going to change a poster, it's going to be available for free. You do not have to spend money for posters. So if there is a change, get with your HR consultant, get with your labor law attorney. They will show you where that's at and as it's happening. My clients we have a program where we tell them every month. We are talking with them every single month on all these changes. So please, before you go panicking and spending money on labor law posters, you don't have to do that. The other thing I want to remind each and one of you is, remember, you've got visitors coming into the building. We've talked about this. You've got to keep that a safe and secure workplace for your employees. Visitors can be bringing in COVID. They will not follow, unwanted visitors, okay? Individuals that are not coming through the front door may be jeopardizing your workforce. Please be aware of any open doors on the outside of your building. Look at your back entrances. Make sure that you know who's in your building at all times. Michelle Dunn, David Barrett, thank you so much for coming on the show today. We really, really appreciate all your great information in regards to staying physically fit through this stressful period of COVID. And Bill, as always, you always know so much more than what I ever expected you to share with us. Thank you again. And remember, you can contact any of them for any additional information. My name is Pandy Pridemore.
Thanks, Pandy. I appreciate it. Hey, Bill, great information. My undergrad degree is in math and economics, so I was really enjoying listening to you.
Oh, great, David. That sounds, I appreciate it. If anybody needs any help, they got my law firm is Hesh Law and also Hesh CPA here in Cincinnati. And actually, I'm kind of unique. Call my cell phone. I really answer the phone when you call me, and I'll help you out. Glad to help you out.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.